If you send them today your credit card number and a prompt, that's going to be saved in their systems and then reused to train future GPT-5s and 6s. And then if somebody asks, hey, give me a credit card number to ChatGPT in the future, they might surface yours, right? If you can carefully architect an application with MCP to never give those secure tokens to a language model, but only like restrict them to the application layer. Because if we can do that, then we may not even need this secure token encoder because we have the benefits of HTTPS. We have the benefits of TLS encryption, which is why people feel comfortable giving their credit card informations to websites today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Ocel, VP of Innovation at This.Labs, joined by some of my absolute favorite co-hosts. First, we have Adam Rackis, Senior Software Engineer at Spotify. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing great as well. And, of course, we have Danny Thompson, Director of Technology at This.Labs. Danny, how are you doing?
I am great. I'm here. I'm surrounded by good company. And honestly, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's just jump into it.
That's right. You can already feel the excitement in our voices because we have a good friend of the podcast again here today, and that is Tejas Kumar. Tejas is it's a lot of things. You are the host of the Contagious Code podcast, of which we are also frequent listeners, author of Fluent React, and also developer relations engineer of Generative AI at DataStax. Tejas, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well. It's the end of the workday. I've got a drink in my hand, non-alcoholic, and I'm just thankful to be here with you all today.
Yeah, we're really glad that you can be here. I think, to kick us off, pulling back the curtain a little bit, we're recording this just after a pretty big week of announcements between Google I/O and MS Build and a few other things that are going on. So I thought maybe just as the sort of icebreaker question here, what kind of got you guys, so what caught your attention this week? It could either be the hype, if you got washed away by the hype, or, what do you think did you have as a takeaway from all the things that were announced this week?
This is a fantastic question. I think Google's new VO models are cool. They can, for those who missed the announcement, they can do audio now. So you could literally, so some months ago on X, formerly Twitter, I said, I cast vision. And I said, this is what the future is going to look like. You're going to come home from work if you're working on site, and you're going to sit down, you're going to get a drink, and you're going to be like, I want to watch a movie. But instead of going and scrolling on Netflix for something to watch, you just type in a prompt. I want to watch a new Spider-Man and Doctor Strange collab with the Fantastic Four. You hit enter, and the movie exists, and you watch it. So I cast this vision, and so many people got mad at me. They were like, yuck, that's the worst, and you're the worst, and I hate you, and you should never, ever speak of such things ever, you piece of garbage. And I don't know why Twitter is so angry, but anyway, that's kind of where we're headed now with this new VO announcement from literally yesterday, where you can write a prompt and you get a video of any scene you describe with audio, a clip of a mini movie, if you will. And so I think that's very interesting for the future of the media, and especially Hollywood. I think that's probably the most potent thing that a lot of other things caught my attention, but this one definitely stands out.
Yeah, it's interesting. There were a lot of announcements, not just I/O, to be honest with you, but several other aspects in general that really have me thinking about how some sectors or some tooling is going to expand. Some will be deprioritized as much. Like, one thing that comes to my mind is RAG. While it's important now, I see this whole path where RAG just in general, may be a lower priority of tooling compared to others, especially with all the new advancements. One big thing that I think I've been betting on, I see more people starting to bet on it more. Google I/O kind of made me feel like they're betting on it too. How MCP is just going to be the universal standard going forward, and it would be almost like, I guess, I don't want to give an example, but when you look at REST API, for all general purposes, majority of APIs would fall within this bracket of utilization or development, right? MCP, I feel, is going to be the exact same thing in regards to LLMs, but I feel like as time progresses, it's going to fall into other areas of development where people are going to reach for it just out of default. What are your thoughts around MCP just in general? Or maybe for listeners that aren't familiar with what MCP is, maybe you want to break down what MCP is and kind of go into that?
Sure, yeah. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, that was announced by Anthropic in, I think, November of 2024. And it's a client-server protocol. So if we think of the web, HTTP. You're a client, you have a browser, that's the client, and you speak to some foreign server somewhere, and you say, hey, server, what's up? I need, let's follow the movie example. I need a list of movies. And so the server sends you a list of movies. The server sends you stuff. This is literally MCP, is that, but for AI apps. And I say AI apps because that's more of a topic now. We're no longer talking about language models like GPT-3, GPT-4, Claude 3.5. These are models. But we're talking about AI apps. Apps have models inside of them, but also have like application code, you know? And so MCP is at the application layer where you have maybe a model that your app works with. And MCP is, as I mentioned, client server protocol. So your AI app would be an MCP client that when it opens, registers with an MCP server somewhere, either in the cloud or on your local machine, and says, hey, MCP server, I'm a new client. What do you have for me? And the MCP server sends your app, for example, a list of tools. These are just functions that the server executes on the server side. It can send prompts, it can send context, it can send a lot of things. And then your AI app has, tools and context it can use. That's basically MCP. And so you can think of this like a flight booking AI app, where it's just a chat interface. Hey, I need to book a flight from Berlin to Dallas for September 23rd. Make it happen. And the AI app would, over MCP, talk to the MCP server. Hey, I need to call this tool, book flight. And by the way, here's the user's information, their phone number, their email, their whatever. And then on the server side, it would receive these input arguments to the function, book flight, call the function on the server side, the MCP server would, and then respond to the client. Okay, cool, I booked the flight, here's the detail, here's the booking confirmation. And the client would, so this is what MCP enables. It enables AI apps to actually like authenticate and take actions on the user's behalf. It's really cool. One issue with MCP now is it doesn't support OAuth yet. So there's no authentication standard. So you can't do that flight booking thing cleanly. You can still do it, but not cleanly. And that's where a lot of the team is working. So the cool thing from I/O, as you mentioned, Danny, is Google has embraced MCP in their new Gemini updates that they shared at I/O, which means basically MCP is the way. Microsoft is adding MCP natively to Windows, the OS. That's insane. So if Windows is an MCP client, then any MCP server can drive your Windows computer. Think about that. So MCP is definitely here to stay, and I'm very excited because I've talked on and off to the member of staff at Anthropic, David Soraya Para, who created MCP, and just to watch his journey from like, I have an idea to this idea is like the world standard now is so cool.
It's funny too because it's a protocol, and I think that nobody's probably going to say this, but I wonder how many plans shifted. Especially again, we're talking about all these announcements that happened at MS Build and Google I/O. I wonder how many plans shifted in the last couple months to supporting MCP, because the community, as soon as they kind of got a hold of it and realized how many pain points it alleviated for them as they were working on agents, I mean, it caught on like wildfire. I remember when I first started seeing it fly around Twitter so much, I thought Google had announced a new performance metric. I'm like, great, now I have to worry about my website's MCP. Let me learn what this is all about.
Minimum
right?
contentful paint.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. And so I started looking into it and seeing it. But like, I feel like the big companies here, again, we saw them announce new agentic code things. We saw Jules and we saw the Copilot piece. These companies wanted to come in and dominate all the piece here. I feel like a lot of their embrace of the sort of MCP protocol probably has to be just because it had already long passed the idea of being the standard by the time they got to speak up about it.
Yeah, and it's also just so, in a way, I don't mean to belittle David's work at all, but it's so obvious in a way where you need a standard protocol, a way to share context between a client and a server, and so it's very right place at the right time, because if David hadn't done it at the time, I'm sure somebody else would have. And so, yeah, a lot of this is just timing the market, so to speak. Danny, you mentioned MCP and REST APIs. I think this is an interesting distinction, because MCP is not so much like REST versus GraphQL. It's more HTTP and FTP. It's a communication protocol over which messages are passed. It's not so much a pattern for creating APIs, although it might be that as well, because there's a TypeScript package by Anthropic that helps you create servers similar to GraphQL, right? And so I can see how that line blurs. And I think going forward, this will be a discussion. I think there will be lots of conference talks. Excuse me, it's a protocol, not an architectural pattern. Because when GraphQL was new, there was a lot of this also. There were a lot of people saying GraphQL is just a specification. It's not a library. But turns out it's both, you know?
Tejas, let me ask you this. Obviously, with MCP, I even gave a talk on it last night. We had a great meeting in a meetup in Dallas, Texas, on a night of AI. It was huge success. We had a massive crowd. People were excited. It was awesome. And I went in with like some examples of what I think MCP servers could be utilized for. One prime example of that is, I was using Duolingo. I crossed 100 days not so long ago, and I've been learning Spanish. And then I realized, wow, I don't know anything in Spanish, even though I spent 100 days doing this thing. And I was like, this might not necessarily be the way that I learn best. Yeah. What if I try to come up with something that works better for my style of learning? And so I was like, let me try and make something. And I start making it, and I start realizing like all these other potential aspects, right? Where it's like, what if I have an MCP server where I can actually create different tiers, like a free tier, basic tier, a premium tier, and based on those tiers, I can like implement some features like rate limiting for the free tier. Like you can make 2 queries every single minute for free. But if you want to increase this, maybe you want to do more sentences, maybe you're being conversational with somebody, et cetera, et cetera. And you could type in a sentence in English and it will give you translations, but it'll give you derivatives like, oh, well, if they now respond with X to this, you can now follow it up with Y to continue that conversation. I was like, now, for me at least, the building blocks are really working well, and it kind of like lets me put more of the practicality into the conversation than it is like just learn this random vocabulary word for the sake of learning this vocabulary word. And so, like for you, what are some of the use cases that you can see people trying to do something with MCP for like them to conceptualize it, or at least if they're not familiar with it, at least understand why people are even excited about this as a thing?
Yeah, great question. I think so. The main reason that I'm excited about MCP is it allows applications like ChatGPT to like do stuff for me. I'm tired of having it like if I say email my boss and tell him that I love him, it will just write me the email. Here, you can copy and paste it. I'm like, I didn't ask for that. And so it's so cool if it can just like send it. Wow, that's what MCP allows. And so I think that's why a lot of people are excited about it. But I think also like on my podcast, thank you, by the way, for being listeners and adding links to the show notes. I had this one episode with Kent C. Dodds, who has also been on this podcast, a wonderful person. And he makes the very bold claim that in the future, we're not even going to use browsers. We're not even going to use the internet. The web as we know it is not going to be like Pages and Tailwind and React and stuff. We use applications like ChatGPT or similar, or it's conversational. You're just like, hey, I want to go to Commit Your Code conference in Dallas. When? And then using MCP, it can go get the information because it has the tools to do so. And then you say, okay, cool, that's the conference. I want to buy tickets. And then it interrupts you and says, wait, but you live in Berlin. Do you want to buy a flight ticket instead? See, I didn't even have to go to Google Flights or like I didn't need a UI. It's telling me, right? And then I say, oh, thanks for thinking of that. Yes, please book me a flight too. That's all I say in the prompt or in the voice. And then it knows the dates of the conference. It knows the travel time between Berlin and Dallas. It knows my frequent flyer numbers. It finds me the best deal and then books my plane ticket and books my ticket to your conference, Commit Your Code. And all of that without ever opening a browser, right? And that is the dream that's what Kent says. Kent's like, you're never going to have to go on a website ever again. You just like talk and make it happen. And I think that's cool. That's why I'm excited about it. That's why I think the whole world's excited about it. On some level, it makes you feel like a god, no? Like you just speak and stuff happens. I don't think ever in human history we've been there. Speak and stuff happen. And if you combine MCP with tools like Lovable, and if you switch the modality of the prompt to be from text to voice, that never in human history have we had something like that, where you just like, you wake up in the morning, you're like, to your point, Danny, you're like, I want to make an app that helps me learn languages my way. Duolingo isn't working. You just say that. And then you create by speaking into existence. Oh my gosh, that's the coolest thing.
It's funny. We just came back from Stripe Sessions, which is like a business-focused conference. It's one of the first times like I've been to like a business-focused one. Every conference I've been to previously has always been tech-related in some way, shape, or form. And the amount of tech talk happening there, number one, really shocked me. I wasn't expecting that going into it. But the amount of people that I met working on problems that you don't really see majority of developers talking about really blew my mind. So much so that Stripe, they announced that they've either invested, supporting, or these platforms are on Stripe. It was 700 plus AI startups.
Wow.
Blew my mind. Number one. Number two, they, in a very serious matter, said, we, to a certain degree, see the checkout process fundamentally changing within the next several years to where they don't believe, for the average person, we're talking about average, not technical, the average person, that they will be checking out without seeing a checkout page.
For sure.
An agent will be doing that process for them. And this blew my mind. And I met someone at a meetup in San Francisco where essentially he is building, and he's being supported by OpenAI, Visa, Discover, all that. He's being supported on creating a tool, which in the moment didn't make sense until I heard that from Stripe. Then this clicked for me. His idea is majority of people are not going to feel comfortable giving their credit card information to an agent. So what he's going to do is create a wrapper for that, which tokenizes your entire credit card information, passes it to the agent. The agent commits your transaction, whatever it is that you decided to do, with that tokenized version, and then the payment provider, regardless of what it is, will then be able to use that tokenized version to process that payment. And number one, it adds like a layer of protection there, right? But number two, the bigger aspect is I feel like this could become the beginning of where people are using different forms of payment for checkout processes via that tokenization pattern. It's a very, very interesting time, but it just showed for a big portion of my career, it's been around e-commerce, and simplifying or making the checkout process more streamlined has always been like a very big focal point. This is now fundamentally changing because one of the biggest issues in, if I'm being honest, in e-commerce is abandoned carts, right? If you had an agent now committing that transaction for you, it doesn't matter how many steps that process is anymore because your agent knows you, they're going to fill out whatever it is. So everything leading up to that cart purchase now matters more, especially in the next coming several years. I think it's like a very interesting time to see how like online retailers and businesses are going to adapt to this.
Totally. I think handling secure tokens with agents is sort of this untapped frontier because you have to give, the point of complexity here is you have to give your secure tokens or credit card number to a language model that belongs to an external vendor like OpenAI, Anthropic, or Google. And OpenAI isn't open, right? And so you don't know what they're doing with the prompts that you send. And in fact, we can be fairly confident that a lot of the prompts that you send them, they use for a process called RLHF, or reinforcement learning with human feedback, the human feedback being your prompt. And so they take the credit, if you send them today your credit card number and a prompt, that's going to be saved in their systems and then reused to train future GPT-5s and 6s. And it's going to be part of the training data. And then if somebody asks, hey, give me a credit card number to ChatGPT in the future, they might surface yours from the memory of this machine.
Yep.
And so I can see why that's important to not give that to the language model. However, I wonder if you can, and this is a great thought experiment, right? If you can carefully architect an application with MCP to never give those secure tokens to a language model, but only like restrict them to the application layer. Because if we can do that, then we may not even need this secure token encoder because we have the benefits of HTTPS. We have the benefits of TLS encryption, which is why people feel comfortable giving their credit card informations to websites today. Like you go on Amazon, you enter your credit card, you wouldn't even think about it because of the magic of transport layer security, TLS and HTTPS. And so I wonder if it probably isn't possible, which is why this very smart person is building this thing. But I do think, Danny, to your point, a day will come where we don't Just like we don't really think about putting our credit cards into websites today, we're not going to think about putting them into AI apps in the future. And whoever cracks that code has a lot of money to be made.
I'll be honest. I mean, I think some people might have general uncertainty about AI, but I think we're probably already past that. I think in general as a society, we have long since given up this idea that we are protective of our data and any type. I think we just implicitly trust technology. And I think some people do that at their own risk far more than they realize that they're doing it. But yeah, I wonder. I think people will be very trusting with this stuff, because I've even heard like this is generational, that some of the like the older generations, when we use AI, we do it very purpose driven and very like infrequently, but that the younger generations, this has become their best friend. Like AI has just been with them for years. They tell it everything, they ask it everything. And now, especially with memory, their experience is radically altered. So I think society is embracing these things, very strongly. And so, yeah, it'll kind of be incumbent on all of us that build these tools to be responsible with that trust.
I think a way you can, now, Danny, you kind of like nerd sniped me on this secure token thing, because I think a great way to go about this today may even be, if we want to avoid the expensive encryption of secure tokens like credit card numbers and stuff, you could do a multi-model architecture, where kind of Apple tried this, right, with Apple Intelligence and failed miserably. But I still think this is a smart concept of an idea from Apple, where you have multiple models. You have an on-device model for your secure stuff that has no access to the internet, and you have a cloud model with more capabilities, but it's like run by OpenAI. And coordinating secure things are local only, and less secure things can go to the broader internet is probably something to be said there. And the reason I bring this up is because of using tools like Olama, where you can run models locally on device. You could maybe create an agent that can buy stuff for you, as long as the locally running only agent has access to your credit card number, because like that language model is on your device. For sure it's not going to be used for some type of reinforcement learning or something like that. In any case, Rob, I think you're absolutely right. I feel very comfortable with AI. I wouldn't put my credit card numbers in there, or maybe I would, but I wouldn't put the secure CVV thing, but I use it extensively, and I put all of my health data in there, all of it, my heart rate variability, my respiratory rate, like all my, and I use it quite extensively actually for like health stuff and sports stuff. And I feel like somewhere there's a German who's like, what are you doing that's not data privacy sensitive? And I was like, I don't care. Like, so what are they going to do with my heart rate, But yeah, I think this is a very variable topic right now. Some people feel very safe and some people don't.
I want to ask a little bit more about MCP servers and clients, because I think I just want to talk about like what those mean and why they have to exist. So I think I've seen a lot of companies release what MCP support, they'll call it, and all it is the code that you would need to put into an MCP server and then host it yourself so that it would act as one. And I feel like I'm curious if that's just because things are moving so quickly and people just need to get something out and that's their way of contributing, or if this is what's expected. And if that's expected, what is the distinction then between server and client if I'm building and hosting both?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we all work with development servers that run on our local, those are servers. They're servers, whether you like it or not, they're servers. They're local servers, but they're servers, A server on localhost is still a server. The problem is it's not useful for anyone else. It's like, hey, go visit my website. It's on localhost 3000. And you're like, oh, it doesn't work. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think so. Here's what I think. I think indeed a lot of folks wanted to get something out. If I'm being fully honest, I was one of them. So in my work at DataStax, we have honestly one of the best things that I've created, and I love it and I use it so regularly. It's fantastic. We have a database. We create a database. It's a NoSQL, non-relational database called AstraDB. The database itself is cool, but you can interact with this database over like a TypeScript client or a Python client. You can also interact with this database with a nice visual user interface, like you can click around and stuff. When MCP was new, I made an MCP server for this. And I'm telling you, I did not expect how much of a game changer this was going to be for my own development productivity and the productivity of my teammates. My teammates, David Gilardi uses this, and it's incredible because like imagine you've got a database, you've got hundreds of billions of rows and columns, complicated schema, and you just like chat with this thing. Like you open Cursor and you're like, hey, who is the highest impact employee in my company? You know, and like it will if it's a bad model, it'll probably like assume what highest impact means, and it would be like, oh, it's Danny Thompson, he closed like 2,000 deals. Or if it's a good model, it'll ask you, what do you mean by highest impact? And then like in natural language, you're like, oh, the one who closed the most pull requests, which is not, that's just a joke, but the one who closed the most pull requests. And then it'll be, oh, that's Adam Rackis. He contributed a lot to this. It would just do that. It has access to your database. It's crazy. And so this delivers tons and tons of value for us because I built another extension of this where whenever we go to events, so Danny, if we come to your conference, and if there's a QR code to be shown, we show this QR code, but when you visit it, it also like just captures like who visited this thing and inserts some of that metadata into our AstraDB. And so now we can literally just chat with our database and over MCP and be like, how many people cared about us at Danny's conference? Just ask this. And it will be like, oh, Danny's conference, there were about 230 people who liked your stuff. Okay, did they give us, did they indicate they wanted us to get in contact with them? Yeah, of those, 137 did. Here's all their emails. Like it would just like, that's crazy. That's never been done before. So we made this MCP server. Honestly, when I made it, Rob, I just thought MCP is cool. I want to play, I want to learn. So I built it. The server, as you mentioned, runs on your device and integrates with Cursor or Claude. And the reason it runs on your device is because you have like secure tokens, again, application tokens and stuff like this. And at the time when MCP was new, there was no solid way to do that, to have a remote server except like authorization headers. It's still an unsolved problem. And so I think a lot of the MCP servers run on device because there just isn't good specification right now, even today, of how do you like protect them with authentication and authorization. That said, part of why I love my job so much, and I said earlier before we hit record that this is the best job I've had to date, is because we get to be on the forefront of this kind of thing. And we have shipped recently, so we work on a tool called Langflow. I think maybe Carter was on this podcast. He talked about it previously. Langflow is a visual way to build AI agents. And as of the most recent release a couple weeks ago, when you host Langflow on the web, and it's open source, you can host it wherever you want, AWS, Fly.io, Render. We have guides on the YouTube channel how to host it wherever you want. When you host Langflow, every project you have in Langflow automatically becomes an MCP server. And it automatically is exposed over the internet and can be consumed by any MCP client. This is absolutely ridiculous. So we're starting to see MCP servers hosted more and more on the internet now. Some Langflow, some not. But I did this for myself. I created a Langflow MCP server to get me to inbox 0 because I hate emails. And it's really awesome because this Langflow server of mine authenticates with my Gmail and my Google Calendar, and exposes an MCP. So when I'm like vibe coding or something in Cursor, in between commits, I go to the Cursor chat and I'm like, hey, do I have any emails? Should I pause here? And we'll quickly go check my emails and be like, yeah, this one thing is really important. Reply to it. Crazy. And so that's hosted. That's hosted on the internet. And there's a YouTube, all this is on a YouTube channel, like how do you do it and so on. But I think this is slowly the pattern. Is it used to be servers local on device, Rob, as you mentioned. And now we're starting to see some more remote servers. But I think the big blocker here, honestly, is just authentication. There is no support at this time for OAuth yet, which once you have that, oh man, that's going to be a game. Then you can do the thing. Yeah, you can buy airplane tickets. You can do all kinds of things. The internet will change as we know it when there's strong security heuristics with MCP.
Can you elaborate a little more what the nuts and bolts were of setting up that MCP server to talk to your database? Did you have to give it like the SQL spec for whatever NoSQL database? Did you have to give it some metadata about your schema and so on?
Yeah. Did you mean To code the MCP server for everyone to use with their databases, or as a user of this MCP server, how did I?
You said you set up an MCP server so that you could have conversations with your AstroDB. I'm just curious what that looks like. What did you have to provide that MCP server in order to accomplish that?
Yeah, I'll answer this in two parts. One, as the user of this server that exists, and two, as the builder of the server. Of course, there's going to be more people using this than building it. And so today, if you wanted to use the MCP server, all you would do is go to your MCP configuration in Cursor or Claude and add the MCP server that executes over a command. So there's two ways you can use an MCP server: command or SSE, server sent events. SSE MCP servers are usually hosted on the internet or localhost, and command MCP servers, standard IO, they work over STD IO, standard input output. Those are just commands you run. So you go to your Cursor, you go to your Claude MCP configuration, and you enter the command. This is the command I'm going to tell you: npx-y at DataStax /astra-db-mcp. That's it. You can even just run this command in your terminal. And what that's going to do is it's going to start on localhost. It's going to start the AstraDB MCP server on localhost. That's it. That server running on localhost, when a client connects to it, the client's going to ask, hey, I'm an AI app. What tools do you have? And the MCP server will be like, I have these tools: get tables, list records, search, delete, insert, database operations. To your question, Adam, how did I configure it to work with my database? Because it's a command that you can run in a terminal. In fact, that Cursor does run in a terminal. Environment variables is the way. So you just set an environment variable with your API key and the HTTP endpoint of your database. You set two environment variables, and you run this command, npx-y, whatever, and that's it. And the MCP server runs on your local machine. It knows which database to point to and the authentication via your local running environment variables. And then you just chat with it. And you say, hey, aggregate this table for me. I want to know how many records are there. And we'll just do it for you. In fact, like if we could screen share, I would show you. It's so cool using this with our like event QR code thing. This is honestly the biggest value, because like nobody has to come ask me anymore. Hey, Tejas, how many people were at your meetup? They don't have to ask me. They just like ask the MCP server. It's
All right. Hey, so you've said a few times now that one thing MCP can't handle is auth. So like if you were to set up a public MCP server for real data, you can't have unauthenticated users just drive by and ask requests for data that they don't own. Surely you could work around that pretty easily with just a handwritten proxy to take those requests in, read the headers, and then forward the request on to the MCP server, telling them who you are. Like, it seems like that's workaroundable today, is it not?
It is totally workaroundable, but that's not the problem that OAuth solves, right? OAuth solves multi-tenant agency. Does that make sense? So like, for example, with OAuth, you have with Google, if you want to do a login with Google, then you have to make a Google app, which gets a client ID and a client secret. And then anyone at Gmail, anyone with a Google account can use that. So that's not possible because that's an OAuth primitive. But if you want just like pass an API key and then go get data from a database, you can easily do that. Exactly as you mentioned, correct.
That clears it up a lot. Thank you so much.
I want to ask about hallucinations. I think that's where a lot of people come at. They hold in the back of their minds. I'm curious your thoughts on what tools, like Agentic Tools and then MCPs, obviously as an extension of that, are doing for hallucinations. I think a lot of people have experienced problems with, the R's and strawberry and all those types of things, right? In my opinion, it feels like the more tools we develop and we make exposed to models, and obviously MCP sort of supercharges that, I feel like that should have a dramatic lessening effect on the amount of hallucinations, because calculations, which these models aren't necessarily great at, happen in code where they probably should, as opposed to in an LLM where it's not what it's trained for. So, what has been your experience, I guess, as you've been playing with and using more tools, building agents and then building MCP servers, as far as like what that does with hallucinations and whether people can trust, hey, when the agent went in and got data out of my database, can I trust that it got the right data or that it's recording it to me accurately? Can I trust the amount of rows it says I have and things like that?
Yeah, that's a really great, I think, so Danny mentioned, actually at the beginning of our discussion, Danny mentioned RAG. RAG is like the antidote to hallucinations, right? And with MCP and agents, that becomes even cooler because agentic RAG is a whole topic. In fact, I'm pretty proud of this. 1 year ago, I called that agentic RAG would be a thing, would be the way. And indeed, it is the way. So how does MCP intersect with RAG in preventing hallucinations? That's a great question. I think if I ask, for example, hey, aggregate my employees table, how many people work here, and I know this number, and it gives me back something that is wrong, or something that maybe I don't trust, then as part of MCP, I can just expose a tool over MCP called double check, and the implementation of this tool, which is just a function, would literally do that. It would take as the input argument what the LLM has said, and then inside the implementation of this function, go compare that with authoritative data from my database. And this time I'm writing the check in code. I'm like, and then I just diff AI said this is the result. And then, you can give the feedback to the AI app over MCP. Okay, you were wrong. And then it will say like, hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong, like so on. So MCP presents like creative ways to mitigate against hallucinations. However, I think you're right, Rob. Hallucinations have gone tremendously lower already just because of the fact that these things can already call tools. And so preemptively, they can, I think one example I can give you of a hallucination problem I'm dealing with literally today is this. I'm working on, right now at my work, literally before this, I'm working on a new thing that is I'm going to share it. I don't, you know what? If I get in trouble, who cares? Like whatever. Like it's anyway. I don't think they'll mind because we're gonna launch it anyway. It's gonna be public, whatever. So
Just confirm it, and we'll edit it out if it's a
no.
problem.
I want to get in trouble. It's fine.
Okay.
So I live for the drama, honestly. So anyway, so here's what we're doing. We're going to launch a really awesome campaign because our tool Langflow makes this so incredibly easy. We're going to launch this new thing. It's called Please Reply. You may have received emails from certain vendors, Netflix, Luma, Meetup.com, and these emails usually are like no reply at vendor.com. And this means there's no one going to receive your reply, so don't bother. In the age of AI, I think we can do better. And so what I'm working on is something called Please Reply. So you get an email from just a standard email, like a confirmation, whatever, from a vendor, like Riverside, Luma, whatever, and it's please reply at something.com. And then you see this, and maybe you have follow-up questions. You literally just reply to this email. AI agent picks it up, does all kinds of like RAG, gets proper data and so on, synthesizes a nice response to you, and responds back to your email. Please reply. We're creating this. It's actually really awesome. Fun fact, you can literally, even today, send an email to please reply at langflow.new and ask anything about Langflow, and you'll get a reply. We're going to change this. So I don't know when this episode goes out. We're going to change this to please reply at langflow.org. So if new doesn't work, org is the one. But that's something I'm working on. We talked about MCP and hallucinations. The problem I'm dealing with today, like a few hours ago, was this thing was just like hallucinating links left and right. You're like, hey, I have this issue with Langflow, and you send an email, and it's like, yes, you can, there's no issue right now, but you can open an issue. Here's a link to the GitHub repos issue page. That link was hallucinated, and it was very irritating. And so I had to deal with like, how do I remove these hallucinations? And how I did it was using two things, two vectors. One, the system prompt. I just gave it, I'm like, here's some links that are important, just in case you want to surface them. But two, agentically, through the use of RAG as well. And so I gave it a tool, and I said, use this tool to confirm or deny links. That's the description of the tool. And so I said, before you present a link, and this is all the tool description, this is how it knows when to use the tool. And the tool was, before you present a link to the user, pass it through this. And if you get back a 404, ignore it. And so just that, listen to how ridiculous this sounds. I'm using natural language to prevent hallucinations by saying, if you know this is a hallucination, omit it. So that has been very helpful. So the system prompt adding the correct links, and then in the retrieval step going like, hey, if you're about to send a link, just verify it first using this tool. And that has completely solved the problem. My coworker Madhavan gave me feedback about this, and I sent a message to him just before this that it's solved by that. And so of course there's a lot more testing and so on. I think this is something very important as well for as we build agents and agentic apps with MCP is every single thing needs to be monitored, logged, and observed because you never know what hallucinations are lurking where. And if you hear about it from a teammate, it's already too late. I knew about Madhavan's thing before he told me. But I think I just cannot say that enough times, that you need to know before your users do, so you can fix it. And when they come to you and say, hey, this thing's broken, you'll be like, yeah, I know it's already fixed. That's the coolest feeling in the world. So
I think this is related to that. One of my biggest frustrations with using AI to answer questions for me, sometimes it doesn't seem to know what it doesn't know. Like I asked it some questions about Tailwind 4, and I don't know if it was still stuck on Tailwind 3 docs. Is anyone working on getting ChatGPT to just say those words that, most guys hate to say, I don't know? Like you ask it a question, it's like, I don't know, or I'm not sure, or I need more information, because it's always so confident, and it's often wrong or occasionally wrong, depending on what kind of questions you're asking it.
yeah, I don't know about ChatGPT. I'm with you. I fully empathize with that. I don't know what they're doing at OpenAI, and they don't work remotely, so I probably never will, because I can't move to California. But I think, yes, I feel the pain of the confident wrongness. And I think for us as developers who develop AI systems, we can very clearly signal to the AI, just say you don't know. In fact, the system GPT-4o has, I think, best in class adherence to the system prompt, meaning you can just in your system prompt be like, just say I don't know. If your confidence is less than 80%, say I don't know. And it will do that. It's really, I wish OpenAI puts this in their system prompt. It's probably not in there. But you can even add to your system prompt. If your confidence is less than threshold, use your tools. And you can name the tools. Use these tools. Use the search the web tool. And it will go and follow. It will use the tool. It will get the right answer and so on. So that's something that I've been doing in my applications.
Dude,
In fact,
I'm going to test the hell out of that. Thank you so much. I didn't know that. And I'm the AI idiot of the group, as you've probably noticed. I didn't know 4.0 could search the web. I thought that was a 04 mini. I didn't. So
No,
wow.
so just a quick caveat: no models can search the web. I think that's but the AI apps search the web, and so models can generate tool calls. Not all models can generate. I think it's worth, if y'all are okay with it, just taking a little bit of a detour and talking about how tool calling works, because I think that's kind of important for people.
Sure.
Is that okay? So these language models fundamentally are just really good at language. That's all. They're not even good at math, as you pointed out, Rob. They're just good at language. And what is language? It's just the collection of grammars, English, for example, but also JSON, right? It's just made of grammars. And so the older models, GPT-3, GPT-2, they were not as good at language as GPT-4o. And so they could never generate decently structured JSON previously. And really what enables tool calling in these models, again, they live and die on language. They cannot call the web. They cannot do anything. They just generate language. That's language in, language out. That's all they do. They can't do anything else. And so when we say a model like 4o can search the web, what we mean is it can generate highly deterministic structured JSON. Think of a JSON object where it's the schema of this object is function name, it's a string. Input arguments is an array of arguments. That's it. So it generates you this big JSON string, and then the application, ChatGPT is an application that wraps the model. The application receives this string, json.parse. Okay, so I need to call this function with those arguments. We'll literally do that, get back a string as output, and then pass it back to the model. Cool, I called your function, here's the response. I think that's so important, because this should then lay the basis for everyone listening that language models themselves cannot do anything. They cannot call any function. They cannot search the web. They cannot book flights. They cannot call. The only thing they can do is generate text. And the actual wrapping application calls the function. And that's the distinction. So when we say agents and MCP, an agent really is an application. It's like an application runtime. It has the context, and it receives JSON from a model and sends back text. But the model itself can't do anything. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, I like that too, because I think that it sort of also speaks to another thing that I think a lot of people that are getting into this stuff for the first time run into a lot, is they feel like fine tuning is going to be such a big part of what they have to do. And it's nowadays really coaxing your agents, giving them better tools, or even developing your own agent is far more potent than trying to fine tune the underlying models that you're using in your application. I mean, I think there is purposes for that. I mean, Copilot just announced what they're doing with fine tuning for Copilot, but I just think for a lot of people that are maybe learning, that may not be one of the first stops you want to make in your education journey right now.
Yeah, like back, I think last year, like a big topic was, is it RAG or is it fine tuning? And a lot of people like were talking about like, what's the difference in RAG and fine tuning? Fine tuning is so enormously expensive. It's so like no single, not even like Levels IO or like, I don't think any like single person, no matter how rich you are, can afford a quality, like high quality fine tune. You can maybe get, so I have my own fine tuned models. They have been very expensive, but I wouldn't say they're like competitive quality. Like they're good for me. You know what I mean? And so fine tuning it's expensive in terms of money, but also compute. You need a cluster of GPUs that are very performant, which is going to be expensive, so money. And then you need time because training takes a long time. And then a less talked about piece with fine tuning is actually like evaluating that the model performs the way you want. So doing evals, like, okay, I'm sending some new data. Am I going to get back what I expect? Like testing software, you know? And that is so time and it's very painful. And then of course, what happens when your evals don't fit? Then you need to do it again and you need to adjust some parameters. It's extremely time consuming and money consuming and compute. It's an expensive process. And so what's easier than that? RAG. Just give some context and a prompt. Good luck, you know? And so I appreciate, Rob, that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people might step on the mine early in their career of like, oh, I'm going to get into fine tuning, and then like just leave AI as a consequence.
Well, Tejas, we'd love to keep talking forever, but, all good things have to come to an end, at least for now. We'll bring you back on to talk about all the other juicy topics as they develop, because like you said, it was on this podcast a year ago that you were predicting that agentic workflows was going to be the talk of 2025, and you are more than correct. So maybe we'll have to bring you back so that we know where to put our investment dollars for 2026. But in the meantime, while we wait, can you let people know where they can find you online, like the Contagious podcast? Obviously, we'll put the links down below, but let people know how they can find you or get plugged into the things that you're doing, or MCPs and kind of the stuff that you've been playing with.
Yeah, thanks. I'm most active on X, which used to be called Twitter, at Tejas Kumar _ link in the show notes. LinkedIn, I post there sometimes, but I do run a podcast, a long form podcast. So it's like episodes sometimes go up to 2 hours, sometimes even more than that. And this is the thing that I love. I don't really earn a lot of money from it or anything. It's just purely for the love of discussion. And I do want to highlight, there's an episode on there, 2 episodes actually. One is titled Catch Up with AI Today. If we can get a link to that in the show, that episode is like bananas. It's this like deep dive into AI. However, we start at the top. We start very shallow, and then like anyone who wants to get into AI, if they listen to that, will be able to land an AI job and be competitive in AI today. It's incredible. It's an absolutely incredible resource. And the reason I made it is because people were asking me like, hey, what can I do? How can I learn? Where do I go? And I didn't have like a confident answer. I had some answers, but there was nothing that would get you from like elementary school to like, I'm going to build something professional, And so that episode is tremendous. I would invite people to, especially if like they're interested now in MCP and so on. And then the other episode is quite old. It's from 1.5 years ago, but it's still pretty relevant. It's titled How Do Computers Actually Work? And it's another like really awesome deep dive where we start by talking about, okay, computers, they're electric devices. How does electricity work? And we talk about electrons. How does power make it to your house and then into your hardware? And then what is firmware and then we walk through the layers of an application, from the application layer to the network layer, Ethernet, Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi. How does it all work? And it's this holistic understanding of how do computers like work, including the internet. And so I think those two, I guess that a lot of the listeners of this podcast are people who love code and who are just interested in learning. And those two, I mean, I would wager good money that there's at least someone could learn from all of those episodes. So.
Wonderful. That's the way I love learning, right? Just start in the primordial soup, figure out when we walked on land, and then now we have futuristic cities, and just enjoy the whole journey. Absolutely. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this episode of the Modern Web Podcast. Thanks to all of you for listening. Of course, thanks to our guest, Tejas. As always, I say the conversation does not stop here. You can find Tejas online at Tejas Kumar _, if I'm not mistaken. Again, all the links will be down in the show notes below as well. You can find me online at Rob Ocel. You can find Danny online at DThompsonDev. As for the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. And as we close out, we'd just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that This. Is dedicated to guiding companies through their modernization and AI transformation journeys. This.Labs is a tech consultancy that specializes in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from ideation to deployment. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, PayPal, and more. Check us out at this.co. That's this.co, THISDOT.co. All right, everybody. See you next time.